If you are new to SWAM, what you'll learn today will radically change the way you make music with virtual instruments. The key is in understanding the fundamental differences between simple sample playback and SWAM's sophisticated modeling technology. Let's take a look at some of these differences. Sample instruments use sample libraries, which are large collections of recordings, one of which is triggered each time you press a key. When you buy a sample library, it can take hours to download. With SWAM, you download only 15 to 200 megabytes, which takes just seconds. Long load times are a problem again when you select a preset for a sample instrument, because initializing the preset requires loading all of its samples for the different articulations at various dynamic levels into RAM. SWAM does not require any preloading to put all of an instrument's articulations at your fingertips right away. Preloading all those samples for a preset of a sample instrument demands a huge amount of RAM as well as disk storage. SWAM's RAM and hard disk footprints are only a fraction the size. Most importantly, your musical workflow is not broken to search for the right articulation sample or the right sample bank for a part, because you shape the sound in real time. And, just as with acoustic instruments, no one can sound like you even using the same instrument. And there's more. Finally, you can play it live. You can bring it to the stage and play acoustic instrument solos. The days of replacing a violin, trumpet, or sax solo with a synth are over. Now, musicality doesn't come free. While triggering a sample is easy, the payoff is small. Learning to be expressive on a truly performable instrument like a SWAM instrument does take some practice. SWAM instruments don't require the years of study acoustic instruments demand, but still, you'll have to learn how to control the sound evolution and expressivity of your SWAM instrument in real time or in post-production. The payoff of this learning curve is the ability to play any musical phrase without the constraints of a fixed ADSR or canned articulation. You will be able to interact closely with your virtual instrument and learn how to create instrumental effects like generating overtones, shakes, transitions, or other natural physical gestures characteristic of a real instrument. You will quickly come to realize that your time is better spent learning a new skill than sitting in front of a screen browsing gigabytes of libraries. SWAM enables you to write a new counterpoint from inspiration to completed part within the time it takes to... Oh, sorry, the library is still downloading. Once you dig into SWAM, there is no turning back. The instrument user interfaces are organized into a few distinct areas to make it easy to grasp how to use them. The header has the preset selection, reset and panic buttons, the MIDI mapping button, and the main menu wizard under the 3 dots button. This wizard guides you in managing nearly every single part of the instrument. Simply open it and follow the steps. The main screen provides, from top to bottom, real-time controls for visualization, the instrument's parameters organized by category, and a main out section with level, pan, and effects. There is also a visual representation and animation of the instrument, shortcut buttons and faders for the most used parameters or functions, a system messages display that gives you feedback on sound attributes like articulations and selected playing modes, plus warnings and so forth, and a test keyboard showing the instrument range and key switches visualization, as well as the transpose setting. Now, all of the directions we're about to give you are valid with the default settings. You can go back to the default settings at any time by clicking the Reset button in the header near the preset name. If you're running the standalone version, make sure you select the correct audio device and configure it to use an appropriate buffer size. The value of the buffer size has a direct effect on the MIDI communication and latency. If you don't know what to set, a sample rate of 44,100 Hz and a buffer size of 256 samples is a good start. You're now very close to starting to play with SWAM. Next, we connect a MIDI controller. To do that, press the MIDI button at the upper right. If you're using a DAW, you'll need to select the input controller on the track where you've loaded your SWAM instrument. If you are using the standalone version, after pressing the MIDI button, press the Inputs button and select one or more MIDI ports that your controller or controllers are using. Then press the Presets button and choose a default controller mapping from the list. You'll find maps in the list for many common controllers, which can get you started quickly. If your controller is not in the list, start with a generic configuration. Although it's possible to edit or automate any parameter in a DAW, the easiest way to start playing with SWAM instruments is with a MIDI keyboard, an expression pedal, and a mod wheel, or wind controller. With practice, you'll have fun mapping more parameters and using different controller types. You should know that mapping controllers to parameters will become addictive. Mapping a controller to a parameter is easy. Press the MIDI button and the interface will display already mapped parameters in purple and those still available to be mapped in green. Click or tap on the parameter you want to map. The easiest mapping method is to simply click or tap the Learn button in the upper right and then move the controller. But you can enter the data to specify the controller if you'd rather. Wind, MPE, and other multi-dimensional controllers work great with SWAM because they provide many interface options for applying musical techniques and skills that will deliver the expressivity you want. The key to expressiveness and realism is the proper use of dynamics. Expression is the fundamental parameter to control for realistic dynamic response. For a SWAM instrument to truly sound realistic, the expression parameter needs to be controlled continuously. It can't stay at a fixed value. Always monitor the input expression value on the main display and adjust the dynamics accordingly. A useful trick is to set the overall monitoring volume fairly high at an average value of expression. This automatically prevents you from overusing higher levels of dynamics. A monitoring level that is too low can easily induce someone to rely on high expression values, which usually yields excessively biting sounds. As a rule of thumb, don't leave the expression parameter fixed to a value for more than 1 second. SWAM introduces a new and intuitive approach for controlling the attack and transition between notes in real time. When playing detached notes, a staccato articulation is performed, and the velocity controls the attack of the sound. So if you press hard on a key, you'll get a strong attack. If you press softly, you'll get a quiet attack. After the attack, the expression parameter controls the timbral evolution of the note. On the other hand, when playing connected notes, you generate a legato transition between two notes, and the velocity controls the portamento time. This means that if the landing note is pressed hard, you'll get a very fast or instant legato. If you press the legato note softly, you'll get a slow portamento. This behavior is available when the portamento control parameter on the MIDI tab of the Advanced panel is set to velocity. For wind controllers, velocity is usually ignored. The attack shape is controlled by the player's breath directly, and the portamento time can be controlled by a MIDI control change message. The default is CC5. With these physically modeled instruments, it's possible to play 3 different vibrato styles by simply combining the vibrato depth, which by default is mapped to the mod wheel, and the expression parameter. For a classical vibrato, use a low vibrato depth over the whole expression range. For a jazz vibrato in the lower to mid registers, use a high vibrato depth while fading down expression at the end of a note, just before release. For a shake vibrato in the mid to high registers, use a high vibrato depth with high expression for the mid to high note range. With this quick introduction, you should have a solid foundation for starting your SWAM journey to a new way of playing and creating music. If you're a musician used to working with sample libraries, you'll need to embrace a new way of thinking. Think like a real instrument player. Remember that manipulating the evolution of a note is just as important as triggering its attack. Sing or imagine the phrase being played by a real instrument and try to replicate that same evolution with SWAM. Remember that real players breathe, so include some rests and staccato notes. After mastering the basics of the attack, legatos, dynamics, and vibratos, you can start diving deeper into this absorbing and rewarding journey. The more you experiment, the more you'll find your own unique sound. So, go have fun and let's make great music together.